My name is Jennifer. I'm unmarried and have lived with my parents all my life. Many assume that I'm still dependent on them because I haven't moved out, but the truth is far from it. There are substantial reasons I stayed home for so long. Rewinding to my childhood, I was 7 when my sister was born. She was adorable. She's your sister, Jennifer. Get along well with her, my parents would say. I'll protect her because I'm the big sister, I recall thinking. My parents were overjoyed with her arrival. Dad often played with my sister, Ellie, occasionally getting scolded by Mom for spoiling her. I looked forward to spending time with Ellie too, but somehow I never grew to like her. Mom, have you seen my gym bag? I'd ask. Isn't it hanging up? You should look after your things, she'd reply typically. I kept my gym bag on a hook in the living room, but it wasn't there. Despite my question, Mom seemed indifferent, responding coolly as usual. I'd end up finding it in a drawer, mixed with other items, after searching thoroughly. Each time I finally located it, Mom would appear. What are you doing? You've made a mess of the drawers. I'm sorry, it requires more attention than Ellie, she'd say. Even as a young child, I felt this treatment was unfair, but whenever I was scolded, I'd involuntarily blame myself, a typical reaction of a child. Since Ellie's birth, Mom began to scold me more frequently, which led me to gradually withdraw and fear similar interactions with Dad. What did you buy? I'd ask. A toy for Ellie. I thought she'd like it. I want a toy too. I'll buy you one next time, he'd respond. This pattern of feeling overlooked and undervalued started early and extended deep into my adult life, influencing my decisions and my understanding of my place within the family. I've always wanted a toy of my own, yet it seemed that every time I mentioned it, the conversation quickly turned to Ellie. That's not fair. I want it because I choose to. I'd protest. My father, growing louder, would respond, "Stop being difficult." If I persisted, his frustration would fill the room, causing my sister to cry. As he comforted her, I stood there, nearly in tears, feeling invisible and uncared for. The scoldings from my mother were harsh, but the sheer force of my father's yelling was unbearable. I always felt on edge around him, and my mother never seemed to take my side. Stop being jealous of Ellie and asking for toys, she'd say. You're the older sibling. Shouldn't you know better? Come help me instead. Handing me a soapy sponge, she'd direct me to the sink. I'd wash dishes mechanically, as if on autopilot, while she attended to my sister. The sounds of their laughter in the background contrasted sharply with my solitude at the sink. When a second child comes into the family, it's natural for the first child to receive less attention. This often leads to feelings of loneliness and the expectation to take on more responsibilities around the house. Parenting is a challenging task, especially when there's a lack of time or emotional bandwidth, making it tough to distribute love and attention equally. I try to tell myself that my sister received more attention because she was younger, but as time went on, the disparity only grew more glaring. My sister, on the other hand, would gleefully wave a magazine around, exclaiming, "Can you buy me the clothes in here, Dad? They're not too expensive, please." My father would consider it, smiling. All right, I'll discuss it with your mom. I love you, she beamed.
Yay.
I love you, Dad. Meanwhile, I only received gifts on special occasions, while she seemed to get what she wanted just by asking. One day, mustering some courage, I too asked for something, only to be met with a dismissive, "Be patient." That response deflated my spirit, and I didn't press any further. As my sister grew, my parents continued to cater to her whims, and the gap in how we were treated widened. In the midst of doing chores like hanging the laundry without a word of complaint, I began to sense my parents' moods more keenly, constantly worried about their perception of me. I never felt at ease at home. Desiring a change, I boldly brought up the idea of moving out for university. I'm thinking of living on my own once I start college, I told them. I can cover my rent and expenses by working part-time. Is that okay? The idea seemed to startle them. Living alone? What's gotten into you? That's dangerous, they responded. But I was determined to find my own space where I could finally breathe freely. My father would undoubtedly be disheartened if I decided to move out, and the thought worried me. Given that my parents hadn't initially supported my decision, I didn't strongly challenge their stance and abandoned the idea for a while. At first, it seemed my parents favored my sister over me, but their words later clarified that this was a misunderstanding. They truly cared for me. My mother, in particular, was saddened by the idea of my departure. This realization dispelled the uncertainties clouding my mind, bringing a sense of relief. Surprisingly, my desire to live independently seemed to alter my parents' behavior. My mother no longer burdened me with housework, and my father expressed a newfound concern for my well-being. It was comforting to know I didn't have to worry about their moods anymore. However, when university life commenced, my daily routine remained unchanged. "What's for breakfast today?" my sister would ask. Despite me staying up all night, I hadn't prepared anything yet. "You mustn't neglect your chores just because you're in university. You need to earn your tuition," they would remind me. In a rush, I managed to serve breakfast, but my day-to-day responsibilities stretched far beyond the morning meal. I handled all the household chores, cooking, cleaning, and laundry. I once believed my parents discouraged me from living alone because they cared, but as graduation neared, I realized this was a misconception. "Dad, Mom, I need you to understand that after I graduate, I intend to live on my own," I asserted. They resisted, suggesting I stay until marriage and lamenting the efforts they made for my education. They feared being left to manage household chores alone, but I was firm in my resolve this time. Despite their tears and pleas, calling it cruel to leave them, I was moved but still gave up on my plans for independence. This decision significantly shaped my destiny. After graduating, I joined as a sales agent, working tirelessly from dawn till dusk, yet nothing changed at home. I was still the primary caretaker. As I started earning, my family's expectations grew. "It's almost your first payday. What should we buy?" they discussed excitedly during a family meeting, making plans without considering my input. Watching them, I felt utterly sidelined, as if I were merely an observer in my own life. Growing up, I always felt the weight of responsibility heavier than most. Every paycheck became a recurring episode where I handed over my earnings to my family. Initially, it was small, manageable requests, which I didn't mind fulfilling. However, as time wore on, their demands grew, not just in frequency but in tone, shifting from polite requests to outright demands. Despite being family, it felt wrong to simply hand over money on demand, but a mix of childhood trauma and a deep-seated desire to be the dutiful child kept me from speaking up. This pattern extended even to my younger sister, Ellie, who, though still in middle school, seemed to have a say in my finances that I never contested. In the beginning, the amounts were small, and I thought I could handle it without much issue. However, as the requests grew larger, my doubts grew alongside them. As a packaging designer, I was earning about $5,150 a month, but soon I found myself living on a meager $500 after fulfilling my family's expectations. This made it nearly impossible to enjoy simple pleasures like dining out with friends or getting a haircut. My life became a monotonous cycle between work and home, with little room for personal time or self-care. At work, my unkempt appearance fueled baseless rumors suggesting financial troubles or deceitful relationships. I kept silent, unable to share the truth of my situation. 3 years slipped by in this manner. By the age of 29, while I had made some attempts to negotiate with my family about reducing the financial burden, they were met with stern resistance, particularly from my father. His intense reactions left me apologetic and more trapped than ever. Despite increasing my efforts at work and growing my salary to $7,700 a month, the additional money also found its way into my family's hands, leaving me with the same $500 for myself. My parents, having retired, seemed to spend their days leisurely, unfazed by the financial struggles that bound me. They used their earnings from part-time jobs freely, while I supported the bulk of our family's needs with my salary. This imbalance in our household's financial dynamics continued to strain our relationships and my personal well-being, yet I felt powerless to change the course of this draining cycle. One evening, when I arrived home, I noticed my parents indulging in sweets in the living room. To outsiders, their lifestyle might seem ordinary, akin to many other families. However, surviving on just $500 myself, I perceived their simple pleasures as almost extravagant. "It's pudding," they mentioned cheerfully, adding that there was some left for me in the fridge. As my sister emerged from her room to join us for dinner, she grabbed the last of the pudding from the fridge and started eating it. While preparing dinner, I discovered the pudding I had been anticipating was already gone. At 25, my sister, still reliant on our parents and, by extension, on my income, hadn't pursued further education or full-time employment after high school. This dependency cycle seemed strange and conflicting to others, but having adapted to my family's dynamics since childhood, I felt trapped in an inevitable role, resigned to a life seemingly destined to revolve around their needs. Amid this, a pivotal moment came with my company's decision to enhance workplace well-being by introducing a counselor. Reluctant participation from my colleagues meant that I was often chosen for thankless tasks due to my nondescript demeanor and lack of protest. Volunteered for a session, the counselor inquired about various aspects of my life, including my family, which I hadn't planned to discuss. Caught off guard, I hesitated but then shared details about my living situation and the dynamics with my parents and sister. As I spoke, the counselor listened intently, their expression turning grave. By the end of our discussion, they introduced the concept of financial domestic violence, DV. "From what you've described, it seems your family relationship, particularly with your parents, might involve financial DV," the counselor explained. I was surprised by their perspective. I learned that financial domestic violence could also encompass psychological manipulation and financial control, realizations that reshaped my understanding of my familial interactions. I wasn't sure if they overheard us, but suddenly my father and sister appeared from the room, looking concerned. "What's wrong? What happened?" they asked. My sister chimed in, accusing me of complaining about not being thanked even when I gave them money. "You really believe that? You went to university because we supported you. Isn't contributing financially just a way of giving back? You're the eldest. It's your responsibility," my father argued, his tone growing more unreasonable. Meanwhile, my mother and sister just nodded and laughed, not realizing how bizarre their attitude was. The person I used to be might not have seen how odd this was, but I've changed. I understand my duty to help out financially since I live at home, but is it fair that I support all four of them when they aren't working? We do work, you know. We may not be full-time packaging designers like you, but part-time jobs are still jobs. Do you want to keep all your earnings for yourself and not give anything back to us?" my sister retorted. "If you're not willing to contribute, then maybe you shouldn't live here. Leave if you can't accept that," she added harshly. Their arguments seemed completely illogical, and slowly I began to feel drained by the sheer absurdity of it all. While I recognize that part-time work is valuable, the truth is they barely work at all. I'm not oblivious to the fact that my family isn't living extravagantly, yet it's hard to ignore that their lives are largely funded by my income. Since I was the main provider, I felt trapped, unable to even enjoy a day off at home. Admittedly, there's some truth in my sister's claim about my ability to live independently. For the past 3 years, my life has revolved solely around work and home, which might have left me lacking in general life skills. There are basic things I don't know, like how to pay an electricity bill, which leaves me embarrassed in various situations. Previously, such thoughts would have deterred me from considering living alone. However, now, whenever I hear their dismissive words, a deep-seated anger stirs within me. I realize I no longer have to endure this. "Thank you, but I'm leaving," I declared, my decision firm as I moved toward the door, pretending to head to work. They suddenly changed their tone. "Wait, we were wrong. Please forgive us. Don't be stubborn. Let's live together peacefully. Don't leave, we'll be lonely," they pleaded, tears in their eyes, clinging to me as if they finally understood. But for me, it was time to seek a new path away from the chaos. Having learned about the patterns of psychological control from the counselor, it became clear to me just how blindly I had been following a path laid out by others. My decision to leave home came as a shock to my family. They stood there, speechless and stunned, unable to find words as they watched me prepare to venture out on my own. I carried the image of their astonished faces with me, wondering if it might be the last time I saw them. A month after moving out, the initial unease of living alone gave way to a newfound sense of freedom. Gradually, I adjusted to my solitude, beginning to cherish the liberty of living without familial constraints. However, this peace was soon interrupted by a barrage of missed calls, over 100 from my family alone. Out of curiosity, I returned one of these calls to my sister, who was nearly in tears, begging me to come back. My departure had left a financial void. The $7,700 I used to contribute monthly covered their entire living expenses. Now, with that money gone and no savings to fall back on, they struggled. My parents, both over 50 and with a lengthy gap in their employment history, found it nearly impossible to secure jobs. My sister, lacking any work experience, faced similar challenges. The stark reality of their situation had finally forced them to consider employment, but opportunities were scarce. Despite their desperate situation, I resolved to stay firm in my decision not to provide further assistance. Reflecting on my past, I recognized how deeply I had allowed my family's needs to overshadow my own. This realization marked a turning point for me. I was no longer willing to sacrifice my well-being for those who had so casually taken advantage of my generosity. Now, liberated from the oppressive environment I once called home, I am embracing the freedom to build my life on my terms. With a clear mind and a focus on my own happiness, I look forward to spending my next day off exploring and shopping for things that truly bring me joy. This is the start of prioritizing myself, a refreshing change that fills me with optimism for the future.